The execution broadcast. The execution chamber floated above Earth like a blade aimed at humanity's throat. Massive observation windows stretched across the circular tribunal hall, revealing the blue planet turning silently beneath the station. Thousands of ships surrounded the orbital fortress. Imperial cruisers, war carriers, diplomatic vessels, all positioned to witness the same historic moment. At the center of the chamber stood General Elena Ward. Her wrists were locked in glowing restraint cuffs, though she carried herself like someone who still commanded the room. White ceremonial armor covered her body, marked with medals earned in wars that had saved entire Imperial sectors. A blood-red insignia of the Galactic Empire gleamed across her chest. Soon it would be stained with her death. Rows of alien officials sat in towering silver balconies above the chamber floor. Green-skinned Vakari generals watched silently beside armored officials from half a dozen conquered species. Human officers occupied the lower seats, separated from the ruling classes as always. Useful in war, unwanted in power. At the highest platform, Emperor Vale Karath observed everything from his black throne. Tall and skeletal beneath layered ceremonial robes, he looked less like a ruler and more like a creature carved from shadow. General Elena Ward, the Emperor announced, his amplified voice echoing across the chamber. You stand accused of treason against the Galactic Empire. Millions watched the broadcast live across known space. Human colonies, military fleets, mining worlds, prison moons. Every citizen of the Empire had been ordered to witness what happened to traitors. Elena remained calm. Commander Riven Sol sat among the human officers, several rows below, fists clenched tightly enough to ache. He had served under Elena for 8 years. She had saved his life twice during the Karthus Wars and once dragged him personally from a collapsing dropship under enemy fire. Now he was expected to watch her die. The accused attempted to distribute classified military intelligence. Emperor Vale continued. Information intended to destabilize unity within the Empire. Elena finally spoke. Unity. Her voice carried clearly through the silent chamber. You mean obedience. Murmurs spread instantly across the balconies. The Emperor's expression never changed. You exposed strategic wartime decisions. You sacrificed human colonies to preserve alien core worlds. The room stiffened. Even now, she refused fear. Elena lifted her chin slightly, eyes moving across the gathered officials. 3 million civilians abandoned during the Draven incursions, she said coldly. Human fleets ordered to hold impossible positions while Imperial command evacuated privileged systems. Several alien officers shifted uncomfortably. Because it was true. Riven knew it. Every human soldier in the chamber knew it. But speaking such truths aloud was forbidden. You mistake necessary sacrifice for betrayal, Emperor Vale answered. No, Elena replied quietly. I finally learned the difference. High Executor Threx stepped forward from beside the throne platform. Towering and broad-shouldered, the reptilian alien wore black execution armor polished like obsidian. His yellow eyes narrowed toward Elena with open contempt. Humans survive because the Empire permits it, Threx growled. Elena almost smiled. That's the mistake all tyrants make. Her gaze shifted toward the human officers below. You think survival is something you grant us. Silence swallowed the chamber. Even the Emperor leaned slightly forward now. Elena's voice hardened. But humans survived Earth long before your empire crawled out of the dark between stars. Riven felt chills rise along his arms. Not because she sounded afraid, because she sounded certain. The Emperor raised one hand sharply. Enough. Instantly, armed guards surrounded Elena from every direction. Energy rifles hummed alive, aimed directly at her chest. Yet she never moved, never begged, never looked away. Emperor Vale stood slowly from his throne. General Elena Ward, he declared, for crimes against imperial stability, you are sentenced to immediate execution. Far below the station, Earth continued spinning peacefully beneath the stars, unaware that history was about to change forever. Threx approached Elena carrying a long ceremonial execution spear crackling with blue energy. The weapon was designed not only to kill, but to erase neural activity instantly. No survival, no recovery, no miracle. The executioner stopped inches from her. "Any final words?" he asked. Elena looked not at him, but at the human officers watching helplessly below, then at the cameras broadcasting across the galaxy. Finally, she spoke. "You fear humanity because we survive what should destroy us." The sentence echoed across the chamber, across ships, across planets, across billions of silent listeners. Threx drove the spear forward. Blue light exploded through Elena's body. Her scream lasted less than a second. Energy surged violently across the platform before her body collapsed motionless onto the floor. Warning monitors immediately flashed beside the throne. No neural activity detected. Cardiac failure confirmed. Time of death verified. The chamber erupted into applause from the Imperial balconies. Several alien officials stood in celebration. Riven remained frozen in horror. On the execution platform, blood spread slowly beneath Elena's body. 20 seconds passed. Then the station lights flickered. At first, nobody reacted. Then every screen in the chamber distorted simultaneously. Warning sirens screamed alive across the station. System failure. Power disruption. Unknown signal detected. Threx stepped backward, confused. 27 seconds after death. Elena Ward inhaled sharply. The sound ripped through the chamber like a gunshot. Her body jerked violently upright. Blood streamed from the wound in her chest. Yet her eyes opened slowly beneath flickering emergency lights. The entire tribunal froze. Even the Emperor stood motionless, because Elena's eyes were no longer entirely human. A faint silver glow burned behind them now. Cold, ancient, wrong. Elena looked around the chamber as though seeing reality differently than before. Then her gaze settled on the horrified faces surrounding her. When she spoke, her voice sounded quieter than before, but infinitely more terrifying. "Now," she whispered, "I know what waits beyond death." The woman who returned. Nobody moved after Elena Ward stood back up. The execution chamber fell into absolute silence, except for the shriek of emergency alarms echoing through the station. Red warning lights pulsed across the metallic walls while the giant windows overlooking Earth flickered with system failures. High Executor Threx stared at Elena as though reality itself had betrayed him. "That's impossible," he muttered. Elena slowly rose from the execution platform. Blood still soaked the front of her white uniform, where the energy spear had pierced straight through her chest. By every biological measure, she should have been dead. The monitors beside the platform still displayed cardiac failure in flashing red symbols. Yet she stood anyway, calmly. The silver glow behind her eyes brightened faintly as she looked around the chamber. Not confused, aware, as though she could suddenly hear things no one else could. Security forces rushed toward the platform from every entrance. Energy rifles locked onto Elena from dozens of angles. "Do not move," a guard shouted. Elena tilted her head slightly. Then, before anyone could react, the near soldier fired. Blue plasma exploded across the chamber. Riven flinched instinctively, but Elena moved before the shot reached her. Not fast. Impossible. One moment, she stood motionless. The next, the plasma bolt struck empty air behind her. Gasps spread through the tribunal balconies. The soldier fired again. Elena caught his wrist calmly and redirected the rifle upward. The blast shattered part of the ceiling in a shower of sparks. Panic erupted instantly. Alien officials scrambled from their seats while guards flooded the chamber. Emperor Vale remained frozen near his throne, watching Elena with growing horror, because he understood before anyone else did. This was no resurrection. Something had changed. "Eliminate her!" Threx roared. The chamber exploded into violence. Rifle fire illuminated the room in flashing blue bursts, while armored guards surrounded the execution platform from every direction. Elena moved through the chaos with terrifying precision. She seemed to anticipate attacks seconds before they happened, sidestepping blasts before weapons even fired. Riven watched in disbelief as she disarmed two guards without effort. No wasted movement. No fear. Only certainty. A rifle discharged directly into her shoulder, spinning her sideways. She barely reacted. The wound smoked briefly before closing beneath torn fabric. Several guards stumbled backward in terror. One whispered shakily, "She's not human anymore." Elena heard him. Her glowing eyes shifted toward the frightened soldier. "No," she said softly. "I'm exactly what your empire created." Power suddenly failed across half the chamber. Darkness swallowed the balconies. Screams echoed through the confusion. Riven saw his chance. He pushed through fleeing officers and reached the execution platform just as more soldiers entered from the eastern corridor. "Elena!" he shouted. She turned toward him slowly. For a brief moment, recognition softened the coldness in her expression. "Commander Sol," she said quietly. Riven grabbed her arm. "We need to move now." Another explosion shook the chamber. Threx barked orders from across the room, while emergency blast doors began sealing shut. Riven pulled Elena toward a maintenance corridor behind the tribunal platform. Two guards rushed to intercept them. Elena stopped walking. The silver glow in her eyes intensified slightly. Then every light in the corridor exploded simultaneously. The guards collapsed screaming as sparks rained from the ceiling. Riven stared at her in shock. "What are you?" Elena looked down at her blood-covered hands. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. "I don't know." They escaped deeper into the station through abandoned service tunnels, while chaos consumed the tribunal chamber behind them. Emergency sirens echoed endlessly through the metal corridors. Riven kept glancing toward Elena as they ran. "You died," he said finally. "I know. I watched it happen." "So did I." The answer chilled him. Elena slowed near a sealed maintenance door, breathing steadily despite multiple gunshot wounds still visible across her uniform. Riven stepped closer carefully. "What happened after?" For several seconds, she said nothing. Then her voice lowered. There was something beyond it. The corridor lights flickered violently around them. "I saw everything," Elena whispered. "Not heaven, not death. Something larger." Her expression tightened slightly. "And it saw us too." Riven felt genuine fear for the first time since the execution. Not fear of Elena. Fear of what she might have brought back with her. Suddenly, every communication screen along the corridor activated at once. Emperor Vale's face appeared across dozens of flickering monitors. "Attention all Imperial forces," he announced coldly. "General Elena Ward is no longer classified as human." Riven clenched his jaw. The Emperor continued. "She represents an existential threat to galactic stability. Effective immediately, any citizen aiding her will be executed for treason." Elena watched silently. Then Vale delivered the command that changed everything. "All human military personnel are to be confined pending loyalty review." Riven's blood ran cold. Human officers, human soldiers, entire fleets. The Empire wasn't just hunting Elena now. It was turning against humanity itself. The realization spread rapidly through military channels across known space. Already, reports flooded in of human crews being disarmed aboard Imperial vessels. Fear became anger almost instantly. Elena looked toward the glowing screens with terrifying calm. "They're making a mistake," she said softly. Riven stared at her. "You think?" "No." Her silver eyes lifted toward him. "They think killing me will stop what's coming." Distant explosions shook the station again. Imperial troops were closing in. Riven handed Elena a stolen sidearm. "Where do we go now?" She took the weapon slowly. Then she looked through the station window toward Earth hanging beneath them. Home. Humanity's birthplace. The species the Empire had spent decades using and underestimating. Elena's expression hardened. "Now," she said quietly, "we remind the galaxy what humans become when they stop being afraid." The human rebellion. The Empire lost control of 3-star systems within 48 hours. By the end of the week, 27 more followed. Human military crews mutinied aboard Imperial warships. Colonial defense stations raised independent flags. Mining worlds stopped supplying Imperial fleets entirely. Across the galaxy, one message spread faster than fear itself. General Elena Ward was alive. The Empire called her an abomination. Humans called her proof. Inside the command deck of the stolen cruiser Resolute, Commander Riven's soul stared at the tactical display glowing above the central table. Red warning symbols covered nearly every nearby sector. Imperial fleets were mobilizing. Entire armadas. They're overreacting, one rebel officer muttered. Riven shook his head. No, they're terrified, and they had reason to be. Stories about Elena multiplied with every passing day. Some claimed she walked unharmed through plasma fire. Others swore she appeared on battlefields before communications even detected her ship arriving. The rumors barely mattered anymore. Fear had already become reality. The command doors slid open behind Riven. Silence followed immediately. Elena entered the bridge slowly, dressed now in dark combat armor stripped of Imperial insignias. The silver glow behind her eyes remained faint but constant, like distant starlight trapped beneath her skin. Every crew member instinctively straightened when she passed. Not because they feared punishment, because they sensed something larger moving through her. Riven approached carefully. Scouts confirmed the Emperor's fleet reached the Valtar Gate. Elena studied the holographic map. That sector holds 12 human colonies, she said quietly. They'll glass the planets if resistance continues. They already planned to. Riven looked at her sharply. Elena's expression darkened. The Empire never intended humanity to become equal partners, only obedient soldiers. Her gaze hardened toward the tactical display. Now, they're afraid humans finally understand that. An alarm suddenly echoed across the bridge. Incoming transmission. Imperial priority signal. Riven activated the screen reluctantly. Emperor Vale Karath appeared immediately, seated upon his black throne inside the Imperial capital. Exhaustion lined his sharp features now. The calm arrogance he once carried had begun cracking beneath pressure. General Ward, he said coldly, you've condemned your species. Elena remained motionless. You executed me on every screen in the galaxy, she replied. What did you expect humanity to do afterward? The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly. You are no longer human. For the first time, anger flickered across Elena's face. That's the lie you tell yourself, so you won't have to admit the truth. Vale leaned forward slowly. And what truth is that? Elena stepped closer to the transmission screen. That humans survived your empire the same way we survived every predator before it. Her voice sharpened. We adapt faster than fear. The transmission ended abruptly. Seconds later, another alarm screamed across the bridge. Imperial fleet detected. Hundreds of warships emerged from hyperspace near the Valtar Gate, filling the stars outside with endless rows of armored destroyers and battlecruisers. Riven stared in disbelief. That's half the Imperial Navy. No, Elena answered quietly. She looked toward the massive fleet surrounding them. That's desperation. The battle began minutes later. Imperial warships unleashed devastating plasma bombardments across the outer defense lines. Rebel ships exploded almost instantly beneath overwhelming firepower. Yet human forces didn't retreat. They adapted. Small attack frigates dove directly through enemy formations, using reckless maneuvers alien commanders considered suicidal. Human pilots overloaded engines beyond safe limits to ram Imperial carriers. Boarding teams cut through hulls manually after shield systems failed. Every tactic broke conventional military doctrine. That was precisely why it worked. Alien fleets relied on order. Humans weaponized chaos. The battlefield dissolved into confusion. Inside the Resolute, Riven struggled to keep pace with incoming reports. Third Rebel Wing breached the eastern flank. Imperial destroyer disabled. Human civilians escaping through the corridor routes. The bridge trembled violently from nearby explosions. Through it all, Elena remained calm, watching, listening, almost as though she could sense the flow of battle before it happened. Then suddenly, she looked toward the tactical map. Threx is here. Riven froze. You can't know that. I do. Minutes later, scans confirmed an Imperial flagship entering the battlefield. The Dominion Spear. High Executor Threx aboard. Elena reached for her helmet slowly. Riven stepped forward. You're not seriously planning to board that ship? Yes. That's suicide. A faint, humorless smile touched her lips. You still think that word means something to me. Before he could argue further, Elena activated the bridge intercom. All human vessels, she announced calmly, her voice spreading across every rebel frequency. Today the Empire learns a lesson it should have understood long ago. Outside the viewport, burning ships drifted through endless darkness while human fighters charged directly into impossible odds. Elena's silver eyes brightened faintly. They taught us survival through suffering, she continued. Now we teach them what suffering created. The bridge fell silent. Not from fear, from belief. For the first time, humanity wasn't fighting merely to survive. They were fighting to become something the galaxy could never control again. Elena turned toward the docking bay doors, toward Threx, toward revenge, and somewhere deep within the collapsing battlefield, the Galactic Empire finally began to understand the horror of creating an enemy willing to rise even after death itself refused to keep her. The Empire's last breath. The Imperial capital burned beneath a sky filled with falling warships. Orbit above the throne world had become a graveyard of shattered metal and drifting fire. Rebel fleets clashed against the remaining Imperial armada, while emergency sirens echoed across every station and defense platform surrounding the planet. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Empire was losing. Inside the command bridge of the Resolute, Commander Riven Sol watched the battle unfold across tactical screens flooded with warning symbols. Imperial Western Defense Line collapsed. An officer reported breathlessly. Another voice followed immediately. Civilian sectors are revolting inside the capital itself. Riven looked toward the central viewport, where the enormous black structure of the Imperial Citadel towered above the planet's surface. And somewhere inside that fortress, Emperor Vale Koroth waited. Elena stood beside the viewport in silence. The silver glow within her eyes had intensified since the rebellion began. At times, Riven barely recognized the woman who once led soldiers through impossible battles with stubborn determination and dry humor. Now, she carried something colder, heavier, like death itself still followed her footsteps. You don't have to do this alone, Riven said quietly. Elena never looked away from the burning planet below. Yes, she answered softly. I do. Minutes later, her strike shuttle descended through smoke-filled skies toward the Imperial Citadel. Anti-air batteries fired desperately from the city below, while rebel fighters tore through defensive formations overhead. The Empire was collapsing faster than anyone imagined, because fear had finally turned against its creators. Elena entered the Citadel alone. Bodies of abandoned guards lined the corridors leading toward the throne chamber. Some had fled. Others refused to fight after witnessing entire human fleets survive impossible odds throughout the rebellion. Rumors spread faster than weapons now. The dead general, the woman beyond death, the human who returned. By the time Elena reached the massive throne doors, resistance had almost vanished entirely. The doors opened slowly. Emperor Vale Koroth waited inside the dark chamber beneath towering black pillars and flickering emergency lights. His throne overlooked the ruined capital through enormous cracked windows. For the first time since Elena met him years ago, the Emperor looked old. Not weak, afraid. You destroyed an empire, Vale said quietly. Elena stepped forward across the polished floor, stained by ash drifting from outside. No, she replied. You destroyed at the moment you taught entire species to live in fear. The Emperor studied her glowing eyes carefully. What came back wearing your face? Elena paused, because she still didn't fully know the answer herself. I died believing humanity was small, she said softly. Then I saw what waits beyond death. Her gaze hardened. And I realize survival is the most dangerous thing humans ever learned. Vale rose slowly from the throne. You think this victory changes what humanity is? He asked bitterly. Your species thrives on conflict. Suffering only sharpens you. His voice lowered. That is why the Empire feared humans from the beginning. Elena stopped several feet away from him. You feared us because we kept surviving mistakes that should have erased us. Outside the shattered windows, explosions illuminated the sky like dying stars. The Emperor gave a faint, tired laugh. I executed you to preserve order. His expression darkened. Instead, I created a martyr powerful enough to ignite rebellion across the galaxy. No, Elena answered quietly. You created proof. Silence filled the throne chamber. Vale glanced toward the burning capital below. Then finish it, he said at last. Kill me. Burn the throne world. Become a monster the Empire always claimed humanity would become. Elena raised her weapon slowly. For several seconds, the chamber remained frozen in silence. And she lowered it. The Emperor stared at her in disbelief. You don't deserve martyrdom either, Elena said. She activated a nearby control console instead. Instantly, every communication system across the galaxy came alive. Hidden Imperial records flooded public networks. Execution orders, mass civilian sacrifices, evidence of species-wide oppression. Decades of Imperial crimes exposed in seconds. Vale's face drained of color as the truth spread beyond containment forever. You condemn the galaxy to chaos, he whispered. Elena looked toward the stars beyond the shattered windows. No, she answered softly. Just freedom. Hours later, the Empire officially surrendered. Across liberated worlds, statues of imperial rulers were torn down while prisoners walked free from labor colonies and military camps. Human soldiers who once served as expendable frontline troops became symbols of the rebellion that shattered galactic tyranny. But Elena disappeared. Some claimed she died during the final assault. Others believed she wandered the outer systems alone. No one knew the truth. Weeks later, Riven stood beside a memorial overlooking Earth. Thousands gathered beneath the newly raised monument honoring those lost during the rebellion. A small child approached him quietly. Commander Sol? Riven looked down gently. The boy pointed toward Elena's statue, towering above the crowd. Was General Ward really dead? Riven stared at the stone figure for a long moment, while distant stars shimmered overhead. Then he gave the only answer that still felt true. For 27 seconds,